what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, November 1st, 2017 here, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and whatever insanity is in store for us, especially this weekend with Antifa starting their civil war on Saturday. So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Quick little program note. In our third hour today, Don Wiskin of Extendovite will be spending a little bit of time with us today talking about his product, which I use myself, and it really does help. And also some of the pushback from the competitors that he's had to deal with lately, and we'll let him give you all the details about that. So getting into the news here, as far as the corporate media is concerned today, the only thing happening is the terror attack in New York, and they're out there saying, oh, it was obviously ISIS, and even though they can't find any connection between ISIS and this guy, he was domestically radicalized, they're going to send him to Guantanamo so nobody can talk to him, and blah, 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 blah. We are getting reports from a lot of people in New York that the New York Police Department counterterrorism trucks and counterterrorism officers were in that area where the bike path was hours before the attack. And, of course, they're already trying to cover it up, saying, well, you know, the Halloween party is a target for possible terrorists, so that's why everybody was out there. But normally, New York has regular police force out there monitoring the safety of the Halloween parade. So already it's looking more and more like this was another one of these staged events to remind us all that ISIS is the enemy, even though there is a ton of evidence that ISIS is actually working for U.S. interests, certainly at least in Syria. And this guy, the suspect, Sayfullo Saipov, he doesn't really fit the pattern. And it's coming on out, the FBI knew about this guy because apparently over the last 2 years there was a terrorism investigation by the FBI and Department of Homeland Security, New York Police Department, and federal prosecutors resulted in charges against 5 men from Uzbekistan and 1 from Kazakhstan of providing material support for ISIS. Several of the men have pled guilty. Mr. Saipov was in that circle of people. It's not been acknowledged whether he was connected with the investigation, but at this point it seems pretty obvious that he was on the FBI's radar and may have been cultivated as an informant. Now, already we're getting all these emails and calls. Oh, come on, everything can't be a conspiracy. Well, no, not everything can be, but we certainly seem to be in a bumper crop of conspiracies. I mean, it was only a few years ago when anybody who said that the U.S. was covertly supporting ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria, oh, it's a wacko conspiracy theory. Now we know it's a fact. It's been proven many times over to be completely true. From the documents from Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State to all the American weapons found in the hands of these terrorists, yeah, it's a conspiracy fact. And we need to keep that in mind. Now, a lot of people are looking at this gentleman from Uzbekistan and saying, well, this is obviously something that's connected with our open borders policy. The Europeans have been saying the same. The more open the borders are, the more terrorism is happening. Terrorists are coming on in. And even Tucker Carlson is out there saying, you know, this is obviously tied to the immigration policy. And he was saying before the open borders, stuff like this just didn't happen. And I'm old enough to remember exactly the same thing. We didn't see this kind of stuff happen when we were very careful about who we allowed into our country or not. Now, Donald Trump is already out there blasting Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer because apparently Sayfullo Saipov was brought into the United States as part of Schumer's diversity visa program. In other words, Chucky Schumer said, come on down, and Saipov basically did. And Trump has been calling for an end to all of these diversity visa lotteries because, again, there is no vetting of these people. It's a shopping list. We need somebody from Kazakhstan. We need somebody from Uzbekistan. We need somebody from Pakistan, and just go down and check them off. Come on, you're now in the country here. And, of course, Trump's attempt to control immigration is being constantly opposed and blasted by the New World Order open borders people. And they're trying to delink it and say, well, when he came into the country through the open borders, he was perfectly okay. It was only after he got into the United States that he became domestically radicalized. And they still can't actually show how that came about, which is another reason this feels like a staged attack, along with the non-stop saturation media coverage. Now, Laura Ingraham is out there making a valid point. We, the citizens of the United States of America, demand our elected officials keep America and Americans safe. When a potential terrorist games the immigration system, gets a green card, rents a truck, and in the name of Allah mows down innocents, that's not acceptable. And she's absolutely right. The safety and well-being of the American people is being sacrificed on the altar of globalism. And the attitude seems to be, well, so what if a few tens of thousands of people get killed? It's a small price to pay for the New World Order and the glorious one world government. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And before we go over to the phones here, I wanted to do this flashback story where there's a gentleman named David Steele. He's a 20-year Marine Corps veteran intelligence officer, second highest ranking civilian in the U.S. Marine Corps intelligence. He's former CIA clandestine services case officer, and basically what he came out and said was most terrorists are false flag terrorists or are created by our own security services. In the United States, every single terrorist incident we have had has been a false flag or has been an informant pushed on by the FBI. In fact, we now have citizens taking out restraining orders against FBI informants that are trying to incite terrorism. We become a lunatic asylum, and he's absolutely right. And I've pointed out many times before, I think all of these so-called terror attacks are false flags. Because when you have any group that seeks to bring about a socio-political change, they need the support of the public. They are not going to go on out and commit acts which will alienate the public against them and their agenda. How far would George Washington and Thomas Jefferson have gotten towards independence for this country if they'd gone into the colonial schools and started shooting the school kids? The answer is not very far. Acts of terror are false flags to demonize a target group, in this case, ISIS. Because too many people are picking up on the fact that, yes, indeed, the U.S. was using ISIS as a proxy in Syria. And again, this doesn't make any sense as an act of terror. He had a BB gun and a paintball gun, and as it turns out, he has a girlfriend and 3 kids. They're living in Paterson, New Jersey. Guys with family connections don't go on out and commit acts of terror. It's another FBI staged event. So now back to Uranium Gate and Dossier Gate. But before we do that, we're going to take a phone call. Frank in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, thanks for taking my call, Mike. You know, I remember using these training guns, and they hurt. They leave a welt on you. Not the typical paintball guns, but something. Actually, I think they were a little bit more painful. But you know, we used them for training. And I just find it interesting. That's not why I called in. I called in about Antifa and November 4th and why I believe there might be some cause for some concern on that. Just my opinion, of course. But, you know, I do find it interesting, though, how all these people that are so critical of the media and don't believe that the media has any credibility, whenever there's a quote-unquote terrorist attack by someone, you know, an Arab or someone from the Middle East, they don't question it at all. They buy the story, hook, line, and sinker, and then want to play, you know, left-right politics. Oh, it's the Democrats, it's this, that. I mean, you know, this guy very well could have had some motivation. Maybe he had a screw loose. Maybe he did do it. Maybe he was inspired by ISIS. But I'm not going to believe. I'm not going to take at face value what the media is saying. This guy could very easily have been a patsy that was completely set up. He may have a screw loose and just be a very easily controlled and manipulated guy. They could have set him up. They could have made him promises and, offered him cash. I mean, who knows? I don't believe any of this stuff. I'm sorry. And I know some people, out there, they would say that I'm a horrible, terrible, despicable person for questioning this, but they want to say the media has no credibility, but then they pick and choose. They believe the media when it's convenient for them.
Yes.
You get so many people that follow the official story of 9/11, but every other day of the week they say, well, you can't believe anything the media says. But the reason that I believe that there may be something, some cause for concern with November 4th and some of these things the Antifa people are boasting about, or in the rumor mill or whatever. I think it would definitely knock this whole pedophilia, thing to the back burner. And there's some very powerful people out there that I think really want that story to go away in a real major way. So they may, if there is some controlling element or elements in the power structure, which I think we know obviously there are, they may give a green light and push and say, yeah, we want some raids to go on. We want some attacks on police or innocent people, whatever, and let's go ahead and let's start up a civil war or something and get this off the front pages or get this off of the alternative media or whatever. So I'm a little bit concerned about it. I would say, I've been asking people, what are you going to be doing on Saturday? Personally, I'm not overly paranoid. I think probably nothing will happen on a major scale, but I'm going to kind of play it safe. I'm going to stick to home. I might carry a larger gun than normal. I'll probably carry a couple extra magazines if I do go out, magazines that hold bullets. I might carry a spare box ammo in my glove compartment or something, but I'll probably stick a little closer to home. I'll probably be a little bit more cautious and looking over my shoulder more and just be more aware of my surroundings, and I would suggest that for other people as well, especially people that live in, dense population areas and people that are going to be going out to where large gatherings are. That's all I got to say.
Well, obviously this thing on the 4th is being ginned up. We need to keep that story that we reported yesterday about how Antifa is actually in communication with the leadership of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We need to keep that in the forefront of the independent media so that everybody understands exactly what Antifa is all about. Now, all of you listening to this show, you might want to go to your local Craigslist and just look for crisis actor ads. And I already did that. There's none here in Hawaii. But interestingly enough, I got an email from the local Republican Party because Trump is going to be here in Oahu on Saturday, and there's a bunch of anti-Trump protests already planned. And oddly enough, the Republican Party said, don't go. Don't show up, because their intelligence is saying there are going to be agent provocateurs dressed up as pro-Trump supporters trying to incite violence. So this is all being staged, managed all over the place. And there may be a few riots here and there. It certainly won't be coast to coast. I mean, they were trying to do that in the aftermath of the elections, and it went nowhere. But we need to keep this link between Antifa and ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the forefront of people's minds so they understand what's going on is nothing about an expression of grassroots America. It's part of another attempt to overturn the election and get Donald Trump and Mike Pence out of the White House. And I can guarantee you right now, Hillary's already got some kind of a machination set up where she can walk on in, even though she's not in the line of succession and she's not even in the same party. But they've been working at it. In fact, one of the plans that they were openly discussing was that Mike Pence and Donald Trump leave the White House. That moves the Speaker of the House into the presidency. Hillary changes her party to a Republican and is appointed vice president. And then the Speaker of the House steps down or gets killed and Hillary gets the White House that way. It's really wild out there, but that's seriously what's coming out of some of these liberal Hillary supporters' writings at this particular point. So we do need to be vigilant about it. We do need to avoid violence. But at this point, you need to understand it's all being staged, managed. It's all being bought and paid for. And we're going to dig out those stories about how Antifa literally went to the G20 to meet with the leadership of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And so they're putting this all together. I'm very concerned that Trump is going to be out of the country basically when this is all going down. So we'll just have to, keep an eye out. Personally, I think it's going to fizzle. But I think they're definitely going to give it a good hard try. Okay? We lost Frank. All right, let's switch over to Steve in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I totally agree with you. Those possibilities for Hillary are all very, very real. I'm sure she's not done yet. Just like that cartoon I sent you today of the little trick-or-treater just like Hillary.
Yes.
She won't go away.
Yes, I thought that was so funny.
Yeah. Hey, what I wanted to mention is, and it's not talked about very much. I know John Stadner's talked about it a little bit, and is the term blowback.
Yes.
Now, this is quite possible if it is a lone person, a lone shooter type situation, a lone assassin, that, when you invade other countries and you bomb them to the Stone Age, as we have with all these drone attacks, there will be blowback on these situations. I don't believe these are all just lone gunmen. I think these are all, there's many, many people in line with these attacks, and I do believe they are false flags, taking us further away from what we actually were focused on at the very beginning. This is like the third one now in the last, 3-4 weeks. My God, we're getting so far away from the Hillary corruption now, and a couple more, and we won't even know about this anymore. We'll be so far off base with Hillary's corruption and actually going after Hillary. So
well, I wouldn't use the word we.
Take us farther and farther away.
I wouldn't use the word we because it is very obvious these false flags are designed to at least lure the corporate media away from covering Dossier Gate, Uranium Gate, Mueller Gate. But as far as the independent media is concerned, we're not buying into it. We're not taking the bait on that one. We're keeping our focus on what is really the major scandal here. And at this point, just like with Las Vegas, I'm not going to waste any more time on what happened in Manhattan. I've already decided it was another staged event. This guy was probably an FBI informant. They set him on up. End of story. Let's get back to focusing on Uranium Gate and Dossier Gate, because right now that is the enemy's weak point. And we need to keep our energy focused on that.
I totally agree. Independent media is doing a great job. You guys are doing a great job. And, yeah, keep sticking with it. Don't lose sight of what the real story is. And these are just false flags to take our attention away. Great job, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Mike. It's obvious how they use these. I mean, it's just so clear that they have these cells of Wahhabists or, these groups of people that they'll use when they call out for the moment they need them to take, the people's conscience off, their mental abilities off of what's on at the moment, So now you got all this terrorism talk on the news media, and it just takes away from people's minds of Uranium One and other issues. So that's the game, Mike. I mean, it's a fact that Hillary Clinton and these other groups of people arm these people. So if they arm these people, then it's just logical that they would have cells of people waiting in the wings, not just here, but also in Europe, Mike. I mean, they passed those draconian laws, like in France, to continue the police powers acts and all these other things. I mean, it's just obvious what they're doing. I think they're going to drag this on as long as they can, Mike. And I don't know, Mike, what's the deal with that EMP drill on the 4th to the 6th? Trump's leaving. He's going to be out of here on Saturday. You got Antifa things plus this EMP from the 4th to the 6th. I mean, every time there's a drill, something's going on.
Well, not every time that there's a drill. I mean, there's a lot of drills that go through and nothing really happens. But it's also, without a doubt, that these staged false flag terror attacks, there's a drill associated with them to provide cover and explanation for why all the assets to deal with it were already in place. A lot of people were saying, look at the poor response to Hurricane Katrina, and then look how quickly they responded to 9/11. And then people said, well, the resources were already in place for 9/11 because just by coincidence we had this drill all set to go. Dustin, stay on the line. We got to take a break for commercials, and I'm going to come back to you after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Dustin in New Jersey. And Dustin, I don't think that what happened in Manhattan was really intended to distract the corporate media from talking about Uranium Gate and Dossier Gate because they weren't talking about it to begin with. I think Manhattan and probably to the same extent Las Vegas were intended to lure the independent media away and get them arguing back and forth about how many shooters there were and where this guy came from. And again, we're not taking the bait. We know where the important story is. And it's in this corrupted heart of the U.S. federal government, which is beginning to basically surface, if you will, erupt from all these running sores of corruption that are appearing all over the facade of our government, and we need to stay focused on that. That's where the government right now is the weakest. That's why they're so afraid right now, is they can't keep a lid on it, and so they're trying all these distractions to try and lure people away and get us arguing about things that are irrelevant. Because let's be very honest, I feel very, very bad for those people who were killed and injured in Manhattan or those people who were killed in Las Vegas, but it doesn't really affect the country as a whole. It doesn't affect me personally. But this betrayal by our government selling 20% of our uranium to Russia, who could then turn around and sell it to our enemies, political kickbacks, pay for play. That degree of corruption in our federal government affects every single one of us, and we should be angry, and we should be out there expressing our anger openly.
And Mike, I know you were not angry, but I know that guy yesterday called about North Korea saying he kills his own. I know you were starting to get a little angry. I just need to tell this to people. We started with George Washington and the founding as a constitutional republic. We have become what we fought against. We have become Rome. We've become the British Empire. We are murderers, crooks, and liars.
We've become the Nazis.
Our government yes, and people don't realize that. We killed millions of people around the world to keep this power in a small group of people who control everything. They steal from you, looting from you. You know, they bail out the bankers in Wall Street and give you the bill. They send your kids off to die in wars. And you get people who call in, you know, oh, North Korea kills their own people. We kill our own people. We're an empire. Empires are shit. Oh, empires are crap, Mike.
Yeah.
There's never been a good empire in the history of the world. And people who think we're exceptional or God bless America, Jesus/Joshua, there was no America back then. There was Indians on this, you know, on this country that we killed or our forefathers killed to push them out of the way like the Israelis do to the Palestinians. So people need to really keep this in mind before they pass judgment on another country. 1.5 million people died in Iraq from the lie. Look at all the people who died in Libya and Syria, Mike. Syria from the terrorists using as a proxy army, which Roman and British Empire used. So people need to really, like, you know, look at, you know, don't throw stones when you live in a glass house, America, you know, because not everybody's good here, not everybody's bad, but you got an element in the West now, the Britons, French, Germans, that and us that are no good. A percentage of the government. And you know, sure, there might be some good people, but, you know, as a whole, they go along with it. The Congress and the Senate go along with it. Either they're blackmailed or they're lying. So I just want to let people know that so they don't just go, you know, oh, everybody else is bad, we're good. That's a bunch of crap.
Well, I don't
think you can see that with the media.
I'm sorry to cut you off. We're coming up on another commercial break here. I think most Americans, judging by the latest polls, they don't see ourselves as necessarily a good nation. We're good people. The government's definitely gone off the rail. But you need to always keep in mind that not everybody calling into a radio show is an ordinary citizen like you or I or most of the people listening to this program. There are public relations firms that are paid huge amounts of money to have, for lack of a better word, shills, trolls, actors call into the radio shows to push a particular agenda. North Korea is evil. We are justified in going in after them. We ought to attack them. And it's called grassroots lobbying. It's perfectly legal. They're not required to identify themselves as paid lobbyists. But it's a reality that we in the media have to deal with. Anyway, Dustin, we're going to let you go, take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we go back to the phones here, a couple of really quick stories. Apparently, CNN got caught showing their bias against Trump again. Apparently, their so-called Russia probe expert that they've been giving a lot of airtime to, and he's out there saying, oh, yes, this is going for... Apparently, major ties to Fusion GPS, the company that came up with that bogus dossier. Now, as you know, the way this was all brought about is the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign, and apparently also the Obama as well, were pouring money into this law firm, which in turn turned around and hired Fusion GPS to go on out and come up with this dossier. So that on the campaign funding records, it simply said legal services. Well, Trey Gowdy is saying that really opens up Hillary Clinton to a charge of money laundering. And that's how dirty it's getting. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Keith in Montana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, several things. I think Dustin could help out his anger management if he would drop that pluralism like some guy over there in Oahu there that is blacklisted. This constant we, you know. I haven't killed anyone. I didn't authorize these wars and all this other crap. You know, like you need to. People just need to drop that and realize that someone else is the enemy, not we. You know. Well, anyway,
when I'm thinking about it, I say the U.S. government. To delineate between we, the American people. Sometimes I'll get lazy and I'll say we this and we that, but you called me on it correctly, and I do try and say the U.S. government is doing this, the U.S. government is doing that, in order to keep the focus where it needs to be.
Right. All right. The reason I called, though, Mike, was in New Jersey they're saying blacks are now compared to ISIS. This is from a police chief over there, which goes in line with our Spokane sheriff over just a couple states over here from me on the eastern side of Spokane there, that said that constitutionalists were compared to ISIS. And like you had mentioned earlier, you don't think that a lot of this is a distraction from what's going on because they're not covering it anyway. I think this is back on the same premise of where the countless petitions were sent in, which exceeded the 100,000 mark to label Antifa as a terrorist group, George Soros, and none of this is actually taking place. They are ramping this up to keep the people fighting among themselves. And now, on top of that, Reuters is coming out now saying that Russia was doing all these ads on Instagram and other media platforms other than Facebook, you know. Mm-hmm. And of course, I had to comment back on that, saying, well, geez, it doesn't help us out any if they're doing ads because we can't buy anything through sanctions, you know. But I think the whole premise of this is trying to keep the people at constant odds with one another to where we're back to that post World War II Stasi thing, where you have a bunch of citizens turned informants, the same as our DHS, Homeland Security, see something, say something, to where everyone's suspicious, everyone's, you know, you watch them, keep the cops busy, and like John Stadtmiller said, is to make all of us the enemy combatants.
Well, I'm sure in the eyes of the government, pretty much all of us are. Anybody who's not drinking the Kool-Aid, anybody who's not swallowing the blue pill is now basically being treated like an enemy of the state. And again, I don't think Manhattan, or for that matter, Las Vegas, was being done to distract the corporate media from anything, because the corporate media is still absolutely in lockstep with protecting Hillary and the deep state and going after Trump. I think they were trying to lure the independent media, and I'm not biting. I'm not taking the bait.
Yeah, and I had one other comment for you there. When we refer to like our government, our military, stuff like that, and support our troops, when I look at these generals and stuff that are all sitting up there, they're probably in their mid-40s. Some of them are a lot older, but their entire chest is just pinned with all these awards and stuff. And when you look at that, you have to sit there and think, this country has never been attacked by a nation state since 1967, which would have been the USS Liberty, of course. But before then, how are these guys getting all these medals and stuff pinned to their lapels there? You know, their chest coats. You know, it's because they are going along with the same standard MO of going in and raping and pillaging and plundering. And this hype that you mentioned yesterday about this Allah snack bar stuff. You know, there are those in schools in Iraq, Syria, in hospitals, at weddings and funerals that don't get to hear an Allah Akbar or Praise America. They might get lucky to hear the whistle of a Hellfire drone.
Yes.
Right before the bomb explodes like that. And when they wipe out 300 over in Mosul in one airstrike, oh, that's nothing because it's them. It's only when it happens to an American that people care. and they should
or people
look at
people
what
are
that
told
does.
to care. People are told to care. We're told to care about everybody who was killed in Las Vegas. We're told to care about everybody who was killed in Manhattan, and I do. I'm not trivializing their pain and suffering of the families. Okay, but at the same time, yeah, we should also feel the same thing for all these people who've been killed in all these other countries. I mean, the current estimate right now is since the end of World War II, the U.S. government has killed somewhere between 20 and 30 million people around the world with all these military interventions. And we should be angry about that because the world is going to blame us for allowing it to happen.
And just like that UN Human Rights Commission there that came out with that 2016 report that said that over 60,000 immigrants, i.e. war refugees, were basically thrown out of 3 countries. They omitted the fact that it was the same 3 countries the United States was bombing. And this is no different, Mike, than watching old archived World War II footage of Allied terror bombings and where the roads of Europe were lined by the millions of those people fleeing those terror bombings of their cities, their graveyards, everything being totally destroyed. They have no place to go. And you could bet that after losing everything, even like Gerald Celente, when you lose it all, you have nothing else to lose. And that's why the term going postal is there, is that most people wouldn't want to live if they'd lost their entire family and all this stuff to some other person's actions. They might want to get a little bit even, you know.
Yes,
but that's
absolutely.
How, when you create terrorism, you know, when you bomb people, you bomb them through terrorism, which creates more terrorism. And it's the endless war thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to take all your time because Dustin took so much, but
okay. All right. Well, you know, Keith, the reality is, again, this guy in Manhattan doesn't fit that pattern. He hadn't lost everything. He'd come to this country.
Right.
All of his friends are saying he was friendly, gregarious, was very helpful. He was an Uber driver for a while, and had a girlfriend, 3 kids. This is a guy whose life seems to be working.
Wait a second, Mike. The thing with the paint gun, a paintball thing, would also allege them too. They had friends because these guys are in clubs that go out and do that.
Absolutely. I mean, you don't get a paintball gun just for yourself. You're part of a team. You know, you get the little padded clothing because paintball guns can hurt. And same thing with the BB gun. He was just palling around with people. I think, given the fact that the FBI seems to have been aware of this guy for at least 2 years ago, that he was basically courted as an informant. And, you know, if you're an undercover informant for the government, it's a very well-paying job. You don't even have to pay taxes on the money. You know, you can get lured on in, and then when the government decides they need a patsy, there you are. They did it to this guy in Manhattan. They did it to Lee Harvey Oswald. And they're going to go on doing it. So all of you listening to the show who are undercover informants, you think about that when you're going to bed tonight. You may be getting a lot of money, and you may be really excited because you think you're a spy, and it's exciting, and it's your espionage and everything. But when the government decides they need a convenient dead body that looks like you're going to be it.
Yeah. Hey, one other thing, Mike. Did you get that photo I sent you of that so-called crash scene over there in New York, which showed that truck?
The one with the bicycle wheel?
Yeah. It's like, do bicycle wheels do that much damage? I can tell you one thing. They should build the World Trade Centers out of bicycles and passport material.
Well, again, I'm not investing a lot of time in this thing because it is such an obvious attempt to distract the independent media away from Dossier Gate and Uranium Gate, and I am just not going there. So, Keith, thanks an awful lot for the phone call.
Hey, wait a second. Yeah. One more thing, Mike. Mike, one more thing. If you're not busy Sunday, call into my show.
Okay.
I want to have you. I'd like to have you talk to my listeners about the same thing you're talking about right now, so people can better understand it on the weekend for the different listeners.
Okay. Well, email me the information about when your show is. I can't commit right now because I have a commitment with Claire on Sunday. But if I can make it, I definitely will.
All right, sounds good, Mike. My best to you and Claire, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot, Keith. We're going to switch over to James in Texas. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, quite a few things on my mind. First of all, I think, can you hear me okay, Mike?
I hear you fine.
Okay, yes, I think we need a third party, like a true American party or an Our American party, because is it true that Tony Podesta was caught up in that Mueller investigation? Right?
Yeah, he very much
He's
is.
A lobbyist.
He's
a lobbyist, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, who are these people lobbying for? You have all these lobbyists in Washington, D.C., even on, if you look at Trump's whole cabinet, a bunch of dual citizens. Did you know that Israel, every kid, woman, and man, free health care, free housing, and free food? You know they got that?
Where?
It's kind of crazy, right?
Yep.
In Israel.
Yep.
Israel, yeah. Wow, they go and tell us that we have to do it less, and we can't have this, and they have to privatize every one of our public industries. I mean, the reason why our country, this is why I don't agree. It's not people in the U.S. government. Well, it's not U.S. people. It's people in the government, but they're not Americans. They're citizens of another nation. They have loyalty to another nation. But you look at Weinstein. What was that interview that he had? He's like, I'm a hardcore Zionist. You're not even an American, dude. You go bash everything about America, but then, you want all this stuff for a country that he wasn't even born in, a country that didn't even, he could have been born in USSR Poland. It's really sickening how people could understand this stuff and they just let this happen. This is why we're fighting the wars. We're fighting against Arab nationalists, and we're the Zionist nationalist army. That's what this is all about.
Well, what this is all about is we're living under puppet rule. We have a foreign-imposed government ruling over us for the benefit of that foreign government. And I remember back when I was a kid in school and we were getting social studies and we were getting all the Cold War propaganda to be on the lookout for, communist subversion. Communists were trying to infiltrate our government. Communists were trying to take on over. And it turned out that, yes, in fact, our government was being infiltrated and subverted. We were just being told to look in the wrong direction because it wasn't the communists who were doing it. It was Israel.
Yeah, but that's what they want for the U.S. and the West. They want a communist-style thing here because the people who are pushing gun control are all Zionist loyalists. They're the same people who believe that the settlers need weapons. AR-15s and automatic.
Okay, James, we don't even need to go into the details of what the foreign rulers want or not. We just all need to understand as Americans that we will not accept rule by a foreign power. Any more than the Iraqis are accepting it, any more than the Libyans are accepting it, any more than the people of Yemen. They're all standing up to throw off these foreign puppet rulers, and so should we.
That's why we need a third party. That's why I say a true
another party is a waste of time. Another party is a waste of time because all parties need money, and the big money comes on in and takes them over. Look at the Tea Party. When it first started, a lot of people, including yours truly, thought this might be the beginning of something that was really going to change the American political landscape. And then all of a sudden, big money moved on in, and they got some star power in there. They had Sarah Palin in there. And the Tea Party basically got hijacked, taken over, and basically emasculated. I'm sorry, a new political party isn't going to change anything because political parties inevitably are for sale to the highest bidder.
What about a leaderless party? A leaderless party that only has an idea, like I said.
We already have that. It's called it's called the American people, and our idea is the Constitution.
Exactly. That's why we need to take care of ourselves. Because once this stuff hits the fan, and if the economy does collapse, and we need to keep our infrastructure maintained at any cost. At any cost, we need to keep our infrastructure maintained because that's the infrastructure that our forefathers died for. People in World War I and World War II. The Americans who lived in the 30s and 40s could never dream about the infrastructure nor the type of technology that America would have. They worked and bled and died for that, and we need to preserve that.
We need to preserve it. We need to improve on it. We need to grow it to catch up to the 21st century. Much of America's infrastructure is still last century, and that's another reason we're unable to compete with other countries in a fair, open marketplace. And that's why the U.S. government is trying to arm twist everybody into these so-called free trade deals to lock the economic system in its current mode, which favors the United States. And all these other countries, they're pulling back. And every country that tries to break free, whether it's Iraq or Libya or whoever, the U.S. attacks them. But now everybody is breaking free at the same time, and that's a problem. The U.S. literally cannot declare war on the rest of the planet and expect to have any chance of winning. James, we're going to let you go here. We're running short on time here, and I got a lot of news to cover before Don Wiskin comes on here. Now, getting on back to the important news. Special counsel Robert Mueller, who, by the way, should not have been a special counsel without a preliminary investigation. That is the statutory requirement which was ignored. But after all this time and all these pro-Hillary investigators and all of this money that was, his first indictments, which seemed time to try and distract everybody away from Uranium Gate and Dossier Gate, basically amounted to nothing. Manafort and Gates were working as lobbyists, facilitators for Ukraine without registering it. Had nothing to do with Russia. This before they even went to the Trump campaign. These indictments underscore the fact that Mueller has found absolutely no evidence of Trump's collusion with Russia. He basically telegraphed his complete failure to the rest of the world, and I think that's why they did Manhattan, because everybody was saying these indictments don't mean anything. Mueller has failed to find anything that proves Trump was colluding with Russia. Oh, look, we've got blood and gore down in Manhattan. Go look at that here. Now, Sergei Lavrov is out there saying, given the indictment against Manafort, which leads to Ukraine, leads to Kiev, Lavrov is saying they should be investigating Kiev and Ukraine, and it's certainly very dishonest for the corporate media to go on talking about the Manafort and Gates indictments as part of the Russia probe when Russia's not part of it. They should call it the Kiev probe. That would be more honest, but then that's not the job of the corporate media. And that is a big, big problem. And we're finding out more and more that it was, in fact, Hillary and the DNC. In fact, almost everybody except Donald Trump was colluding with Russia. And apparently Hillary Clinton was liaising with Yanukovych, trying to find ways to damage Donald Trump leading up to the election. Hillary's projecting what she and the DNC were doing onto Donald Trump, and everybody now recognizes it. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And John Podesta has decided he's going to play the victim card. And he's out there saying he's the victim of a smear campaign by President Trump. And he's saying it's not bad enough I was the victim of a massive cybercrime directed by the Russian president. Now I'm the victim of a big lie campaign by the American president. Woe is me, woe is me, have pity, have pity, have pity. I don't think so. Now remember, last August, there was a story that came on out that showed the financial records revealed Russian collusion with the Podesta group. That's not a big lie. It's not a smear. And let us not forget that the story that Russia hacked the DNC and Podesta and Hillary has been absolutely destroyed. Much of it was a leak, probably through now dead Seth Rich. Julian Assange has gone on record saying that the emails that WikiLeaks had were obtained legally from the U.S. State Department through a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. So Podesta's out there basically rising on a busted flush. And we're not having any of it. So something you need to keep in mind, because obviously we're entering a phase where the deep state, the narcocracy, the corporate media, the only thing they've got left is to just come up with more and more spectacular false flags in an effort to lure us away from the important stories. And how do you decide what's important? Very simple. Is it affecting your life? You personally. If you weren't in Las Vegas or you weren't in Manhattan, those incidents, as terrible as they are, they don't affect your life. Out of control Obamacare premiums, that affects your life. Corruption by the politicians running your life, that affects your life. That's how you decide. You need to think in terms of your own self-interest. Think about your own wallet, your own children. That tells you where the important stories are. And the guideline is always, when you see something spectacular on TV, oh, they've got blood and gore and all this other spectacle here, what are they trying to distract you from? Always ask yourself, what are they trying to make you not pay attention to? What are they trying to lure you away from? And again, I don't think this has as much to do with the corporate media, because the corporate media is already in line. They've given scant seconds to the Uranium One deal scandal. They've given scant seconds to the revelation that the DNC and the Clinton campaign paid for this bogus dossier on Donald Trump. They're all about the NFL kneeling and the latest celebrity news and even all the stuff they're fanning up about Hollywood. They're throwing their Hollywood liberal friends underneath the bus to try and save themselves right now. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Let's get into the war news. There's a lot of war news out there, and it, too, is being trivialized, marginalized by the corporate media, and certainly war falls into the category of news that does affect all of our lives because we're all paying for the war. Many of us are losing family to the wars, and we may lose our nation if we, in fact, proceed on this war and lose, which I think is the most likely outcome, especially if it goes nuclear. Now, following the Russian submarine's Caliber cruise missile attack into Deir ez-Zor, the ISIS defense in Deir ez-Zor has pretty much collapsed. And Syrian government forces and the Syrian Arab Army, Tiger forces, Republican Guard, have basically already liberated neighborhoods of Kanamat, Kasarat, Badr, and the old airport. So they're making great, great strides across there. It's all but over. It is really all but over. Now, another indicator that we are being lied to, and first of all, I want to preface this by going back to the revelation last week that we have forces all across Africa occupying most of those countries, military forces. And it started with that ambush in Niger that killed 4 Americans, and then the U.S. admitted they had 1,000 troops sitting inside Niger. That was the hub of Western U.S. military activity in Western Africa, which came apparently as a surprise both to Congress, which is supposed to be in charge of deciding where we go to war or not, and even Donald Trump, who at this point appears to have ceded war authority to the Pentagon, which is unconstitutional. Now, we have been told up until recently that the U.S. only has about 500 troops inside Syria. And by the way, none of those troops are there with the permission of the Syrian government. But apparently in a video briefing from Baghdad, Major General James Jared, head of the U.S. Special Operations Task Force against Daesh, basically said there are 4,000 U.S. troops on the ground in Syria. This was reported in Stars and Stripes. And then immediately it was followed by a report, oh, he just misspoke. It's only 503. Really, we wouldn't lie to you about something like that. Tillerson has come out with a very alarming statement testifying to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson revealed that the U.S. presence in Iraq is permanent and said that even if Iraq specifically requests the U.S. to leave and withdraws all permission for them to be there, the U.S. will stay. Now, it does bring up a thorny problem of the U.S. troops' legal immunity from war crimes. Because if Iraq withdraws permission for them to be there, it's also withdrawing that immunity. And Iraq could start prosecuting some of those Americans on the ground in Iraq for some of the things that they've been doing. But, I mean, talk about the arrogance where the U.S. is saying we've gone into this country, we've destroyed Iraq many times over, going back to Desert Storm. And now Iraq's government is saying, we'd like you to leave, we want to do business with the Russians, and Tillerson is saying, no, we're staying. How dare you ask us to leave your country? Just because it's your country doesn't mean you get to run it. Now, here's a little interesting story. This came out of Blacklisted News. We've been in Afghanistan for 16 years. And over these 16 years, we have been assured we're making progress in Afghanistan. And they have these different statistics and different metrics, and they always pick the one that looks the best. And now all of a sudden, because of all the embarrassments in Afghanistan, the Pentagon is now saying they will keep all Afghan war progress metrics secret from now on. And the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, John Sopko, basically said the Afghans know what's going on in Afghanistan, the Taliban knows what's going on in Afghanistan, the U.S. military knows what's going on in Afghanistan. The only people who don't know what's going on in Afghanistan are the people paying for it, meaning you, the American taxpayer. You're not entitled to know how your money is being spent in Afghanistan, whether it's actually leading to any kind of a success, or if they're just pouring more and more money into Afghanistan to simply not have to be forced to say, we lost there. Because there's another article that came out from, surprise, Popular Mechanics, which in the past has been very much on board with the official story about everything, including 9/11. But they actually came out with an article saying by every metric that really matters, the U.S. government is losing Afghanistan. By every single metric, except, of course, for the opium. That's still flowing freely, and I guess that makes it all worthwhile. Here's another example of Western arrogance run wild. Turkey is building up their arms, and they basically had a choice of buying the advanced Russian S-400 system or the much more expensive and possibly less reliable U.S.-made alternative. Turkey chose to buy the S-400, and NATO is upset. They're threatening consequences because Turkey bought a Russian weapon system instead of the American one. See, it's all about money. It's all about the military-industrial complex. And the arrogance of NATO of going into Turkey and saying, no, you will buy your weapons from the countries we tell you to buy them from. Now, there is a resolution in the House, House Concurrent Resolution 81. It's sponsored by Representatives Ro Khanna, Democrat of California, Walter Jones, Republican, North Carolina, Mark Pocan, Democrat, Wisconsin, Tom Massey, Republican, Kentucky, 34 other lawmakers. And it utilizes a provision of the War Powers Act to swiftly terminate U.S. military assistance for the Saudi war in Yemen. And unfortunately, Hoyer, the minority whip, is trying to block it, trying to keep that war going. Now, as you know, one of the areas of contention for the United States right now is Iran, which is fully in compliance with the P5+1 agreement. The IAEA has unfettered access to all of Iran's nuclear sites. The IAEA is saying that Iran is keeping all of its commitments. But the U.S. wants to expand the agreement to limit Iran's ability to make long-range non-nuclear ballistic missiles, because they don't want to have to face a lot of opposition when they invade Iran, which we know is on everybody's agenda, especially Israel's. Well, Major General Muhammad Ali Jafari, the chief commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, basically came on out and said, you're a little late on this because Iran already has missiles capable of striking the U.S. forces deployed in the region if anybody tries to invade Iran. And he says there is already a program to extend their range. See, that's what this whole thing about the missiles is all about. The U.S. wants to invade Iran, and they don't want Iran to have the means to fight back. They want an easy invasion like they had in all these other countries. So they're trying to bluff and bargain and blackmail and threaten and sanction these countries to give up their weapons of deterrence so that they can invade. And these countries understand that's exactly the game the U.S. is playing. And the U.S. is going to make all kinds of promises, none of which will be kept. They assured Libya that if Libya got rid of its nuclear weapons program, Libya would not be invaded. Libya got invaded. Same thing with Iraq. Iraq gave up their chemical weapons on the promise that they'd be left alone. They got invaded. Assad gave up his chemical weapons on the promise that he would not be invaded. He got invaded. Iran has suspended their nuclear program completely on the promise they wouldn't be invaded. Looks like the invasion is already on. And that's why nobody's listening to the U.S. government anymore. The U.S. government's credibility is shot all around the world, and even including the American people. Now, Russian engineers have commenced work on Iran's second nuclear power station. And Vladimir Putin is in Tehran for meetings with Iran's leaders. And it's another example of how the U.S. bullying, the U.S. aggressive approach to foreign policy, its imperiousness, is actually backfiring, and it's driving more and more nations who used to be friends with the United States government into the Russian and Chinese sphere of influence. This policy is a complete and utter failure. But just like human-caused global warming of the Big Bang, nobody has the courage to stand up and challenge that prime assumption that they're all operating on. Now, Rex Tillerson, in his magnanimity, has gone on out and granted permission to Pakistan to act against terrorists. And basically they're saying that Pakistan says if the U.S. provides them information, they will act. In other words, Pakistan is going to become another proxy for the U.S. in the region. So they're trying to get Pakistan under control. But again, sooner or later, the U.S. will break a promise. Pakistan will pivot away, because that's the pattern that's been happening over and over and over again. The U.S. government is losing World War III already. They're leaving a lot of dead bodies and a lot of ruined cities in the wake. But more and more countries are moving away from the United States. They're dropping the U.S. dollar. They're pivoting toward Russia and China and Asia in general, while the U.S. and Europe are succumbing to this refugee crisis and economic decline. Now, as you know, a lot of people got very upset down in Texas when it turned out that financial assistance to replace homes lost to the hurricanes, or contracts to businesses that were going to be rebuilding in the wake of the hurricane, all included a clause where you had to promise you were not boycotting Israel and you would not boycott Israel during the term of the contract. And this all supposedly came out of Governor Abbott, who seems more worried about Israel than the people of his own state, who are supposed to be his top priority. I read that in a book somewhere. When you're governor of a state, your number one priority are the citizens of that state. But I guess Abbott never got that book. Well, now up in Maryland, their governor, Larry Hogan, is being accused of virtual McCarthyism because he's using executive orders. Can't get this through the legislature, but he's using executive orders to basically say the state of Maryland will only award contracts to businesses that refuse to boycott Israel. If businesses support boycotts of Israel, they will not get any business from the state of Maryland. I have a good idea, okay, and I know it's going to seem rather heretical, but Governor Hogan ought to be awarding the contracts to those businesses who can do the best job for the lowest price. That is wise leadership. That is good governance. And I would like to remind the good governor that boycotts are a recognized form of peaceful protest protected by that First Amendment, along with our right of freedom of association, which carries with it the implicit right that we don't have to associate with people we don't really like. But it is shameful and humiliating to see all of these politicians who just dive into Israel, no matter what is going on in their own state. Hurricanes, yeah, we will deal with the hurricane, but you got to promise you're not going to boycott Israel. Yeah, we got to get our infrastructure built up, but we're only going to do business with companies that are friends with Israel. Governor Abbott, if you love Israel so much, why are you here? Why are you not over there? Same message to every American politician who's up there saying, I'm a friend of Israel, I support Israel. Good. If you're a friend of Israel and you support Israel, move there. I'm sure they could use your help. But America needs leaders who are going to put America first, second, and third. Or we are not going to survive as a nation much longer. We are being bled dry by this parasite. And there's going to be nothing left but an empty, dried husk. And I'm not the only person who's saying the same thing. Over at UNS.com, they have an article. This pandering to Israel has got to stop. And this idea that you're not going to be allowed to do business in the United States of America unless you're a friend of Israel is ridiculous. We've allowed this politics of Israel to just overwhelm our society, and that's not right. The only politics that should overwhelm our society are the politics of America. Meanwhile, over in Lebanon, security forces have dismantled an espionage cell working for Mossad, and apparently these members were collecting sensitive information, passing it on to Mossad. And we know the Israelis are spying on everybody, even the United States. We're supposed to be their friend. We're certainly their wallet. And remember, the largest foreign spy ring ever uncovered in U.S. history was uncovered just before 9/11, working for Israel. Does that seem like the action of somebody who claims to be your friend and constantly has their hand out for more money? Now, getting on over towards Asia, U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis, in his testimony before Congress, said the White House has rehearsed a possible response not just to a North Korean nuclear attack, which isn't going to happen. Kim Jong-un isn't that stupid. But he added that Washington would launch a nuclear attack at North Korea if they thought North Korea was about to launch one. In other words, the U.S. is planning to nuke North Korea on the basis that North Korea might be about to attack. Do you remember prior to the big war in Iraq, where phony Tony Blair was out there saying, Iraq could attack us in just 45 minutes warning. We've got to move first. Or when Hitler said to the German people, Poland could attack us at any moment. We have to attack them first. It's the same big lie. Now, Senator Bernie Sanders, along with 7 Democrats, have started a new bill through the Senate that basically says that there can be no preemptive strikes on North Korea, or in fact any military strike on North Korea without prior congressional authorization. Now, this would not apply if North Korea attacks first, which gives the war machine an easy out, a false flag. But at least the Senate is trying to regain the congressional authority over war, because that's what's in the Constitution. Only Congress can declare war. We were never intended to be a nation that goes to war on the whim of the chief executive, and yet that's how we've been, almost going back all the way to the end of World War II. And now, of course, you've got Tillerson and Mattis are arguing for a new open-ended universal authorization for the use of military force, a blank check for war wherever and whenever they feel like it's necessary. And that is absolutely a military dictatorship, and that is not America. That is not the Constitution. That's not the United States. That's not we the people. It's an out-of-control military-industrial complex just gorging itself on blood and money. Other people's blood, other people's money. And it's exactly the condition Eisenhower tried to warn us about in his farewell address about the military-industrial complex, and in his other speech, the Iron Cross speech. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go look those up online. Eisenhower understood what war was. He'd been there. As the supreme Allied commander in Europe, he had seen war firsthand, and he wound up being one of our most anti-war presidents in history, as opposed to the more recent crop of presidents who spent the war flying jets over Texas for the National Guard, and that's as close as they got to real war. For them, war is easy. It's an abstraction. It's a video game. It's other people's money. It's other people's children. They've never had to confront it. Now, apparently, the Trump administration is going to defend the ongoing, decades-long embargo of Cuba. There is a symbolic United Nations vote coming up condemning this embargo for its duration, and the U.S. will vote against it. It really doesn't change anything, but it is basically undoing Obama's attempt to normalize relations with Cuba, which is one of the few things Obama did that I agreed with, for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, to get Cuba on our side, as opposed to being returned to a platform for Russia in the middle of the Caribbean. Trump's getting bad advice. We'll be right back with a phone call. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. I just got fed up with the corporate media. It's nothing but Manhattan, 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 ISIS, 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 ISIS. I put it on the science fiction channel. If I'm going to be lied to, at least let it be entertaining. Let's take a phone call now. Philip in Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, three things real quick. Going along with your topic right now, Dustin brought up the subject of American exceptionalism, which you defined recently. Treaties and international law applies to everyone else except Americans. That's
except
your American
the U.S.
exceptionalism.
government. Except the U.S. government.
Yes. U.S. government, yes. Another thing, as anecdotal evidence, that the latest attack here in New York is a false flag. Thanks to Vault 7, we know that these modern vehicles can be commandeered, and he could have been in that situation. And the third has to do with the chatter about possible upcoming EMP attack. And some time ago you were talking about people's fear about an EMP is not as founded as they think it is. Can you address that again about the EMP and how it doesn't fry all of the electrical equipment that that people have been led to think that it does?
Well, before I do that, I need to point out something. There's another factor regarding Las Vegas and Manhattan, and that is that the USA Patriot Act is up for renewal. And so we may see a whole flood of these phony terror attacks so that they can keep that USA Patriot Act, which is the basis for the erosion of our constitutional rights. So we need to keep that in mind as well. As far as EMP, it was discovered quite by accident during the period when they were testing nuclear weapons in the South Pacific, and they decided to launch one outside the atmosphere just to see what it would look like. Big giant blue bubble way out there in space, and it knocked out the electricity here in Hawaii. And the way it works is it basically just kicks the Earth's magnetic field, and that sudden movement in the magnetic field will induce electricity in power lines. So if you're plugged into the city, the grid, you will feel the effects of the EMP. But small, isolated, battery-powered equipment is probably not going to feel the effect. And more, of course, not because of the threat of nuclear war, but because of solar storms. The power distribution system has been hardened to an extent. So we could definitely look at that. I mean, even this FEMA drill on November 4th is supposed to be caused by a solar storm rather than by an EMP. But it is a real thing. I mean, especially for large areas of the country where you've got power lines stretching across tens or even hundreds of miles of the plains, you're going to get a very serious voltage spike there. But again, surge suppressors are going to go a long way to mitigating that. On an island as small as Hawaii, again, we did feel it from that first experience, but again, small, portable, battery-operated electronics are probably not going to feel that.
Thanks for the clarification.
All right, thank you. And we've got another caller, but we're too close to the commercial break, so we're going to put that on hold until after we come back. Here's an interesting story, and this is coming out of FortRuss.com. Apparently, a lot of the Ukrainian authorities, the representatives of the authorities, are starting to leave Kiev. They're resigning their jobs. They're getting on out. And apparently the indications are that Poroshenko's government may be on the verge of a collapse. And everybody wants to sort of be gone and not be in any position of responsibility when it all starts to come apart. And I think that would be a really good thing if Poroshenko were to come on down. They could bring Yanukovych back, because the Ukrainian people do not like Poroshenko. They see that he's a sellout to Europe, he's a sellout to the United States. The Ukrainians all over Ukraine have suffered horribly ever since this coup d'etat. We'll be right back with a phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right back to the telephones. Richard in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Oh, great. Okay. I have had so many problems with this audio system. It's just amazing. But I'm glad that I've gotten through. I'm a new. I'm sorry. Did you say something?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'm an old retired forensic neuropsychologist. Okay, and I grew up in the '70s, and I had my first big political experience back at Kent State University with my first wife, and we were next to the National Guard when we heard the order to fire. Okay, so I have watched things for a long, long time, but I've not encountered anybody who is erudite as you are and knowledgeable about what's going on, and so I just decided that if I'm going to support anything financially, I'm just an old retired guy, but I can provide some money. I'm just going to go ahead and do that and contribute to RVN.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And every little bit helps. There's no such thing as too small of a donation. And we understand that our audience are struggling to get by. The money junkies have grabbed all the money, and they're just spending it on people who are willing to help them stay money junkies and stay in control. And those of us who are out here fighting to restore the republic, we don't have that kind of financial support. And so, as John Stedmiller was saying in that ad, we do rely on you. We need your support. Without it, we're going to go away. And nobody in the independent media who's really doing the job they're supposed to be doing is getting rich doing it. In fact, we get harassed a lot. My servers are under constant attack. We're targets, and we recognize that. And every little bit that you send in is really going to help us stay on the air, stay on the satellite, stay on the internet here. And as long as we're talking about this, everybody get your pencils and papers out again, because I'm going to give you an address and a phone number. The address to send in a check, money order, box tops, whatever, Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, and that's in Round Rock, Texas. And then the phone number is, if you want to call them with a credit card or something, 800-724-2719, and I believe that's extension 3. And Mike, if you could verify that for me, I would appreciate that. So, Richard, thank you for the kind words and thank you for the support. And it actually is it's very hard to ask for donations because we understand that people out there are struggling. And so when we do ask, it's because we really need it. Nobody's going on out and buying a new Ferrari or anything like that in this line of work. I mean, we'd all love to be making the money that, these talking heads in the corporate media are making, but we're never going to make that kind of money because we won't do what they're doing, which is to lie to you. And that's just a choice that we've all made. So, Richard, thank you for the kind words, and we're going to let you go here and get on back to the war zones, emphasis on the plural. And speaking of costs, it's time that you start looking at what all of these interventions, the so-called war on terror, what it's really costing. It's costing an average of $250 million a day. And since the beginning of the war on terror, right after the 9/11 false flag, you, the American taxpayer, have foot the bill for $1.46 trillion with a T dollars. And that is over and above the $6 trillion with a T the Pentagon somehow misplaced. And then you wonder why there's no money left over to repair the roads, the bridges, the rails, to have clean drinking water coming out of the faucets, to have reliable electricity and internet service. We're in a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but that is the reality. Every single penny the government can get goes to bombs, bullets, bandages, or to Israel, or into their own pocket. And there's nothing left over for you, the American people, who pay for it all. Government is the most expensive thing you'll ever buy in your entire life. Are you getting value for money? I think for most Americans, the answer is going to be a resounding no. I keep saying what we really need is a cash for clunkers program for the government. We take our old, bloated, inefficient, wasteful government, we take it over to the junkyard, we put it in that little machine that crunches it on down to a little rusted metal coffee table, And then when everybody gets a check for $50,000 with which to buy a new, smaller, more efficient, easy-to-use government. I think the time for that is right about now. And getting on back to the state of our military, despite all that money that's pouring on in, it's not good. We've been talking about these latest American weapon systems that have major problems. F-35, huge laundry list of problems. Even Israel is starting to say, look, this may have been a bad deal. Same thing out of Great Britain. F-22, they've never fixed that problem where it's asphyxiating its own pilots. The Freedom and Independence class littoral combat ships, severe corrosion, drivetrain problems. Now the Navy is saying they're never really going to work the way they were supposed to. Scrap them, start all over there. Aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford. All kinds of new high-tech whiz-bang gadgets they can't get to work. Apparently the magnetic catapult, which is supposed to replace the steam catapults, is hitting those planes so hard it's actually fracturing the landing gear and the tow hook. And it's not just the United States of America. Story coming on out of Sputnik News. Apparently the National Audit Office in Great Britain is reporting that cannibalization by the Royal Navy is up by 49% over the past 5 years. In order to keep some of their fleet at sea, they're literally having to go to some of the other ships that are still at port and take parts from them. In fact, the construction of the submarine HMS Artful has been delayed because some of those parts have been borrowed for submarines already out at service. They can't find the parts. The supply chain just isn't there. Part of that may be because of this tendency for military contractors to now subcontract some of these components to overseas providers, which raises the possibility when the war breaks out, we could be cut off from some of those providers. I mean, right now, the F-18, which is a marvelous aircraft, by the way, they have major part shortages. It's actually to the point where the Blue Angels are having difficulty keeping all of their planes in the air. So in their rush to come up with all these new whiz-bang weapons, the existing military is being neglected. It's one of many reasons why I think if the United States gets into a war with a true military peer like Russia and or China, they're going to be in trouble. I mean, it's one thing to go into a little tiny Middle Eastern country, that can't fight back and act real butch and go on and bomb stuff. Except for that embarrassment when Trump sent the cruise missiles into Syria. Half of them missed the target. But you go up against a military peer, Russia and China, whose goal in their military development is cost-effective weapons rather than enrichment of politicians and defense contractors. We're going to be in a little bit of trouble. Even if it goes nuclear, we're going to lose. I'm absolutely convinced of that. So let's take a look at our economic news here. California is in serious, serious trouble. Soaring unemployment, massive strain on the social system from the illegal immigrants and the refugees. There are trillions of dollars in debt, exploding crime. California is headed for a major implosion. And I'll tell you just how out of control it is over there. Over in Los Angeles, there is a 264 square foot studio cottage. And its asking price is $550,000. That's how out of control it really is over there. Now, Russia and China have agreed to extend their currency swap agreement. Russia and China are doing business with each other in their own domestic currencies without going through the U.S. dollar. And this, of course, is angering the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government because their goal is for everybody to still be back on Bretton Woods. All global trade and banking goes through the U.S. dollar, with the U.S. getting a piece of that action. Now, over in Iraq, there was that push for Kurdish independence. That appears to have died on the vine. And one of the reasons the U.S. originally supported Kurdish independence was the idea that it would reach out and include some of those major oil areas like Kirkuk. And that didn't work out very well. But apparently, Putin has now moved on in to the Kurdish region, and they're making all kinds of deals for that oil. So after all that war and after all that bloodshed, Russia's walking away with much of that oil revenue. And they'll sell it for whatever currency they want to. Now, Tesla appears to be in trouble. They have borrowed heavily on a product that at the moment they're losing money on every unit sold. It's actually costing them more to build, ship these cars than the asking price. They're trying to loss lead to get people to buy the cars. And people are buying them. It's a cool car. I've had a chance to see one up close. They're very, very nice. But it's now facing competition from a lot of lower-priced versions, like the Leaf and the Bolt. But the weak part on the electric car, of course, remains the batteries, which take a very long time to charge, and your range is limited. Now, for people like Claire and I, where our entire driving range is basically 3 miles around our home, we don't go much further than that. Electric car makes a lot of sense. For people in larger areas like Los Angeles, not so much. But Toyota is now announced they've come out with a solid-state version of the lithium-ion battery, which will be smaller and lighter, store more energy, and take just a few minutes to charge. This may be based on that technology that Toshiba unveiled at the Consumer Electronics Show. That will change everything. We're going to see electric boats, electric lawnmowers, and everything. The only question will be, where are we going to get the electricity? Well, natural gas maybe, thorium cycle reactors ideally. Now, the other day we were talking about how a jeweler in Canada had gone down to the local bank and purchased a gold wafer from the Royal Canadian Mint because they needed the gold to fabricate something that they were making. No big deal. Got back to the jewelry shop, got the wafer out of the package, couldn't run it through the machinery that normally would help them take gold and shape it. Went to bend it, and pure gold bends very easily. This wafer cracked, came away with a jagged edge. We still don't know if it was really tungsten or not. And the Royal Canadian Mint is out there saying basically it's not ours, and the counterfeiting of Royal Canadian Mint products is extremely rare. This is an isolated case. And already we should be suspect, because if indeed the packaging, the little blister pack with all the little seals and icons all over it, if it didn't come from the mint, then someone went to a great deal of trouble to counterfeit not only the gold wafer, but the packaging. Nobody does that for just 1 or 2 fake items, but for thousands. So is somebody scamming gold out of the mint? Is somebody trying to flood fake gold into the market to discourage people from investing in gold, keep them in the savings account in the stock market? There's a lot of scamming going on, and we know that a lot of places that are supposed to be holding gold are holding tungsten bars instead, which raises the question, where did the real gold go? By the way, when this tungsten cord gold story first broke from Germany, I made a suggestion on this radio show, which apparently has now become widespread practice, and that is the gold dealers are getting these little ultrasound machines from that they use in hospitals, because if you put the little sensor on one of these gold bars and there's a tungsten core inside, you will see the boundary layer between them. Just something to keep in mind. Let's grab a phone call here. James in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, how are you doing? By the way, on the gold thing, I think if I remember correctly, I've read that gold is so ductile that an ounce can be drawn into a wire 1 mile long. Tungsten, not so much. I work with tungsten myself sometimes. It's pretty
Well, I mean, look at gold leaf. I mean, it's amazing how thin they can get gold leaf. It really is wonderful stuff. I used to work with it when I was going through my craft phase and everything. But yeah, gold is an amazing material.
But the main reason I called in was because of the Kevin Spacey debacle. I was wondering if they were adhering to an accurate portrayal of, the procedures of government, so I looked it up on Google, and I came to an article from Business Insider from 2015 that said that, ironically, Bill Clinton told Kevin Spacey that House of Cards was 99% accurate as far as the Machiavellian skullduggery that was kind of implied.
Well, I guess that's why they canceled it.
Yeah, well, also ironically, Robin Wright once said she never did nude scenes or sex scenes because she felt that acting should be about the ability of the actor or actress, not a body. But also in the Business Insider article, it said Barack Obama told Spacey that he wished things were that efficient. I don't know if you've ever seen the show. It's actually very well done. It's just unfortunate that Kevin Spacey has the lead role.
Well, I mean, he's a good actor. Let's give him his due. And there's a lot of good actors, and the fact that he himself is gay is no big deal as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Did he misbehave? Yeah, a lot of people do. Is this being exploited right now? Yes, entirely. I mean, we might be seeing Hillary Clinton and the narcocracy perfectly willing to throw all of their liberal supporters in Hollywood underneath a bus to provide yet another distraction away from Dossier Gate and Uranium Gate. So stay on the line. Yeah. Stay on the line, James. I'm going to come back to you after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with James in Ohio. And James, before we get back to you, a couple of comments I want to make. I remember Julia Roberts had a fun comment when she was asked why she doesn't do nude scenes. And she said, well, if I'm clothed, it's a drama. If I'm nude, it's a documentary, which I thought was a very humorous way of dealing with that.
Yeah.
But let's be really clear here about what's going on with all of this Hollywood stuff. Yeah, there are bad people in Hollywood. I saw a lot of them when I was working in my career. There's a lot of good people in Hollywood. They don't get the attention they deserve. And yes, a lot of this bad behavior was going on. That being said, we also need to realize that a lot of times people who feel that they are slighted will get revenge by making an accusation, an allegation. And we shouldn't get caught up in the enthusiasm of going after people like Harvey Weinstein, that we allow opportunists to harm the careers of people who have not really done anything wrong. So we have to be very, very careful about that. But again, I'm starting to think that we're seeing Hillary Clinton and the narcocracy are perfectly ready to throw all of their liberal supporters in Hollywood underneath a bus to save themselves, to just have another distraction away from Uranium Gate and Dossier Gate. And as I said before, I'm not taking the bait, which is why I'm not spending a lot of time on this stuff about Kevin Spacey, other than to say that he is a fine actor and I admire his work.
Yeah, one final comment on human psychology. A friend who does a lot of business posted a link on his Facebook page. This company, their shares went up 392%, and apparently the only reason was they added the word blockchain to their company name. So that's all I got for you today.
Well, now you know
Keep
why.
up the good work.
Now you know why Wall Street calls investors in stocks the thundering herd. And,
right.
Yeah, it is unfortunately, if you have absolutely no moral character whatsoever, it is actually very easy to manipulate large crowds, and not always to their own benefit. All right, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much. We're coming up here on the top of the hour, and Don Wiskin. Video that is linked to from whatreallyhappened.com, all that's left of Sears Canada. And it's a phenomenon that we see anytime stores are going out of business. The employees there, they know their jobs are about to end. They basically stop being enthusiastic about trying to keep things neat and clean. And basically, it's just there's a floor, and all of the remaining inventory is just on the floor, and people are going through the piles looking for any bargains that might remain. And it's a very, very depressing thing to be seeing. And finally, a federal judge just ruled that government subsidy payments to health insurance companies are, in fact, illegal. There was a big stink when Obama started to do that, and he was tapping into various slush funds to try and keep the health insurance companies going when Americans stopped buying those mandated policies and settled for the IRS fines instead. Talk about an epic fail. That was it. We'll be back after station identification with Don Wiskin. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and we're still trying to connect with Don Wiskin of Extendovite and talk about what he's been having to deal with trying to bring a decent product to market in the face of so many large corporations who are basically selling junk. And in some cases, okay, we've got Don on the line. Joining us on the line right now is Don Wiskin of Extendovite, heartdrop.com. And Don, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. It's good to be back.
Well, we've had you on the show before, and of course, we talk about your product all the time. You're one of our loyal advertisers about the product. I'm using it myself, and it is making a difference, especially for old people like me. But the reason I wanted to get you on the show today, and we're going to talk about the product a little bit further on, is you were sharing with me that you had recently had a little bit of a kerfuffle, if you will, over one of the variations of your product with the Canadian authorities. You want to share that with us?
Well, sure. In March of this year, our manufacturer, Health Canada, had gone to check in on them. I mean, I don't know if people are aware of this, but we have an NPN number. It's a natural product number that you had to have by December 1st, 2013, in order to continue selling a natural product in Canada. But the NPN number also gives you the right to start making some claims that your product can do things. Well, they were doing some surprise visits now that they have all this power, and they dropped in on our manufacturer. They didn't like his Swedish bitters because it was an alcohol base, and they didn't like he had a cancer drug that he was making there. They didn't like that, and so they got very upset, and they set his bar very, very high. And then they found the Extendovite brewing away in the corner, the liquid version. So they came after us and said, well, we're going to put you through a bunch of tests. You're going to do a stop sell until we get that done. So I said, okay, I'll comply. I have no choice. I mean, I want to continue selling this product. So they put us through a whole bunch of tests, and we passed every test. I mean, the Extendovite liquid and the Extendovite capsules, they also had us test the capsules, but they didn't stop us from selling that because there's no alcohol in it. So they kept us going and kept us going. We passed all the tests. And then, I figured we'd be back selling it in late June, but no, they just kept asking for this and asking for that, stuff that was outside of our licensing. So finally, in September, I caught on to what they were doing. Well, actually, in late August, I caught on to what they were doing. Myself and the consulting company and one of our manufacturers all got together and we talked about this, and Health Canada had asked me to exceed what I was supposed to do. So I very politely, told them that our product was fine. Everything about it was good to go. We passed all of your tests and all of the tests that we were supposed to have in order to comply with our NPN number. And then I politely asked her to please allow us to continue selling this product. Well, it took her another 2 weeks after that, but I figured it wouldn't happen just overnight because I was being rather rough with somebody who has all the power. So about the second week of September, she sent us an email and said, okay, everything seems fine. You can go ahead and continue to sell it. The stop sale has been lifted. But for, those almost 6 months, I was like sweating it out because we were about to lose our product ability to be able to make it here in Canada. I was looking at moving our company to the States in order to keep doing this because we have lots and lots of people who like that liquid. who were buying the capsules, but they wanted the liquid back, and we finally got it back. But this is the power that the NPN gave them. It's like a DIN number in the States. Well, we have a DIN here in Canada, except it's for a natural product. And once they come into your life, they have all the power. There's nothing you can do. The consulting company I deal with said, you have to do whatever she says. You're at her mercy. And I was like, gosh. But it was quite a spot to be. But we managed to get through it because I didn't give up. I just kept persevering and sending her messages all the time as to, let us continue on. We've done everything that we're supposed to do. And finally it was over and we were back to selling. But during this time, one of the health food stores that carries our product, they had 625 different products all through their same manufacturer, and all 625 were called up for an audit, and they didn't get all 625 back. So we were very, very lucky that we have such a clean product that she couldn't find any complaints anywhere. And I was on a show with a guy out of Ireland a few weeks ago. He started taking our product, and he said when he was looking around, he couldn't find any complaints. And that's 18 years of being in business, and that is phenomenal. You just don't get that.
No, you really don't. The part that really leaps out at me is that you basically have contracted this manufacturer to produce the liquid version of Extendivite, and the authorities went into his manufacturing plant, and they had issues with some of the products he was making for other people, not you. But while doing that, they said, well, guilt by association, because you're being made in this factory, we're going to put you through this ringer.
That's absolutely right. We were guilty by association. And, I love this guy. He's 74 years old. He finally shut down and retired. We have a new manufacturer, but we're still, on the same manufacturer at this moment. But in a few more months, we have a new manufacturer. He's already been screened. He's been accepted by Health Canada. We had to do that while we were in the middle of all of that. So we're looking good for the future.
Well, that's really good. And again, getting back to the product, and we have talked about it before, it's basically to maintain cardiovascular health and lower cholesterol. And for people of my AGE who are spending way too much time sitting in a chair in front of a computer day after day after day, after a while you start having to look at issues of blood circulation. And this product is really good on that because I was dealing with some of those issues before, and then you started sending me my Extendivite, and Claire and I are both now taking it. And it does really seem to be helping to get me back to my normal obnoxious self. I went through a bad period there about a month ago, and this stuff is really starting to help work that out. So, again, getting on back to the ingredients. And unfortunately, the Heart Drop sticker is hiding the bottom one on the list here, but it's hawthorn. This is all natural stuff. This is all from nature. Garlic powder, valerian, which is a combative. That's what they start with to make Valium. They take valerian and they move a molecule around, patent it, and sell it for 5 times as much. Bilberry, ginkgo biloba, and I actually don't see what that bottom one is because of the sticker. What did I miss?
Well, there's cayenne, garlic, hawthorn, valerian, milk thistle, ginkgo biloba, and bilberry.
Yeah, milk thistle is the one that is hidden underneath the sticker here. But again, the important thing to keep in mind is all of this stuff comes from nature. And we have mentioned this before. The mindset of the pharmaceutical industries right now is they don't want anything from nature because it can't be patented. And their route to maximum profits is some kind of a synthetic chemical that they've come up with in the lab, or they've started with something natural and they've changed it enough to qualify for a patent and market exclusivity. And there literally has been a war against any kind of cures or treatments that are available in nature, stuff that you can grow in your own backyard, because if you're growing what you need to keep yourself healthy in your backyard, then they're not making money off of you. And so I'm not at all surprised that there may have been a little bit of an institutional hostility toward this product, and I appreciate the fact that you were talking about moving here to the United States of America. I think were you to do so, you might find the hostility a little bit more open. We're seeing that certainly now with all these states that are trying to decriminalize marijuana. We're even seeing it with the cannabis oil products, which are not intoxicating. It's a separate component of the cannabis away from the intoxicant. And even these products are coming under attack because they can't be patented and monopolized. And the entire medical industrial complex is just driven by and obsessed with maximizing profits, very often to the detriment of the customer and the patient. And so it's one of the reasons why Claire and I, we try and avoid orthodox medicine and doctors as much as we can, and we do turn to things like Extendivite to try and keep ourselves healthy.
Well, Extendivite, we've been doing this for 18 years now, and it is amazing how well it works. We just had a call last week from a chelation doctor in the U.S., and he had a patient who started doing really, really well and started getting healthier. For those who don't know what chelation is, it's a formula, an EDTA formula that they introduce intravenously into your body. And back in the 50s, they used it to get the lead out, and they found that it really improves circulation. The blood bank has been using chelation since the 50s to store blood because it keeps the calcium and the cholesterol from binding together so that they can store the blood longer. And that's what it was doing. It was getting the calcium and the metals out of the body. Well, we're doing the same thing. The Extendivite is a form of oral chelation. It chelates the heavy metals away from your liver, allowing your liver to go back to work and handle the toxins that we're exposed to every day. And there's also great nutrients in there to feed your body the food that we're not getting from our starved diet, because there's no nutrients left in the soil with all this industrial farming. Food is basically the next weapon of mass destruction, and it's happening now. People are getting sick all the time. In the early 1900s, when a doctor passed his medical exam, they didn't even study heart because heart attacks weren't something that were prevalent back in the 1910s, let's say. But shortly after that, once they started industrialized farming and getting more industrialized in our world, then yes, we build up these chemicals in our body. We can't get them out, and it takes things like Extendivite to help remove them and give you back your health.
Well, what's really interesting is I've noticed that as the overall health of Americans continues to decline, and it is in decline along with our life expectancy, the corporate media and the food companies and pharmaceutical companies are always quick to say, well, it's a lifestyle choice. You're sitting in front of that computer when you should be out walking or swimming, and yes, they're right to an extent. But we've also come to understand that we live in an age literally of a chemical onslaught on our health. And it's not necessarily intentional. It is just allowed to happen for the sake of profitability. And we're seeing more and more chemicals and fillers added to our food in order to stretch it, make it look like we're getting more food. But again, there's no real nutrients in there. And we understand that a lot of these artificial medications that we are being given may carry serious side effects. In fact, one of the things that amazes me, the United States is one of the few countries that allows advertising for prescription medication on TV. And they'll have this big, glitzy, expensive commercial about this wonderful medicine. And then, of course, at the end, there's this very fast-talking individual saying all the bad things that this drug can do, including kill you. And people still go on out to their doctors and say, oh, I want to try this, I want to try this. And I think it's absolutely absurd. And so it's another reason to basically look at natural alternatives to deal with what whatever your issues may happen to be. And it gets back to something that I like to call coevolution. And that is that when you're looking at the back of Extendivite and you're seeing the ingredients out there, these are all life forms, plants and so forth, that have co-evolved with our biochemistry over millions of years. There are no surprises there. When you ingest these plant products, your body knows exactly what to do with them because they have been dealing with each other biochemically for 1 million or more years. But these synthetic chemicals coming out of the pharmaceutical laboratories, they're brand new, and they may look sort of, kind of, maybe like the natural variety, but they aren't exactly. And your body isn't really sure exactly what to do with them. They'll try and fit them into the appropriate receptors, but there may be something hanging off to one side. And over time, this can sort of build up a degree of toxicity in your body. And it's allowed to happen again because it's all in the name of maximizing profit.
Yes, it is really a shame that the world has come to the love for money. Unfortunately, it's not a love for humans, or it's not a love for our health, and we have to get back to basics. Herbs have been used for thousands of years. The whole idea behind Extendivite is based on German usage of natural medicines and the herbs that are required, like the garlic, the cayenne, the bilberry, the hawthorn. Those are 4 basic herbs that are really good at giving us help. And then the other things we added, the valerian was there to help calm you while the other herbs are going to work. The milk thistle is the most potent liver rejuvenator known to man since 1995 was when they actually discovered it. And it helps to rejuvenate your liver. And the ginkgo biloba, more oxygen to the heart and brain, but as well the ginkgo is a blood thinner, which helps to keep your blood flowing. And then, we've had a lot of people who were on our product who have had Coumadin or warfarin, as it's commonly known, for blood thinners. They weren't happy. They took our product. Every time they went to have their blood checked, the dosage of the Coumadin got lowered. Usually within 1 year, you're off the Coumadin, the blood thinners, because the ginkgo and the garlic are thinning your blood just enough so that you don't have to take these harmful drugs in order to overcome that.
Well, a couple of interesting stories. First of all, it's certainly in terms of garlic, I mean, that's been known about for thousands of years. I think Hippocrates even mentioned it in some of his writings there. But I remember when I was a kid, I had this book. It was an herbalist's manual from the turn of the previous century. And there was all kinds of stuff in there for common ailments, and it was all stuff you could just go out into the forest and find for yourself. And when I made a donation to this museum that opened up in my hometown, I included this book along with a bunch of other stuff, and I regretted it. And then much to my delight, not too long ago, I discovered there had been a reprint. People are still interested in this, and I was sent a copy of the reprinted version, which I now have, and no, you may not have it because I'm using it. But again, this stuff has been known about for a long time, but the Orthodox medical establishment wants you to forget all about it. They want to forget about all the things that are just growing out of the ground around your home that will make you feel better and help you deal with these very common ailments that we're all subject to, especially as we get older, because the goal is to get you dependent on their product coming on out of the pharmacies. And now, of course, we've got this huge scandal where the executives of a big pharmaceutical company that specializes in synthetic opioids, fentanyls, has now been arrested for literally bribing doctors to prescribe these highly addictive medications to patients as opposed to non-addictive alternatives that would have worked just as well. So you have to go on in and realizing that the Orthodox medical establishment, it really is all about the money. And they're not that concerned with curing you. In fact, they don't want to cure you. If they cure you, you go away. They never see you again. It's all about getting you chronically ill and then treating you for that chronic illness for the rest of your life and just making huge amounts of money. And we have seen in this country attempts to ban things like nanosilver, attempts to make vitamins a prescription-only medication, attempts to ban valerian root to prop up sales of Valium. And you really need to understand that you need to look at the motives of the medical establishment, that it's not really about making you healthy or feeling any better.
No, it really isn't. And, you just get healthy by luck when you're following that route. But, just imagine if you had a company making pharmaceuticals and over 50% of North Americans have some form of chronic ailment, so 336 million. So imagine if you had 150 million people giving you $100 a month.
That's a lot of money.
How powerful would your company be?
All right,
well,
Don.
That's where we're at.
Don, we got to take a break for commercials. Stay on the line, please. And when we come on back, I think John Stadmiller has something he wants to share with you. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently we have a listener who called on in and said, maybe we ought to send some Extendivite to President Trump because he's currently on statins. Might help ease things up a little bit. So we're talking with Don Wiskin of Extendivite, and I understand John Stadmiller is also on the line?
I certainly am. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing fine here. Well, Don, take it away.
Hey, Don, how you doing?
Very well, John.
I was going to get you on my program today for a little interview, but you know what? I'm going to postpone you to next week. And, Michael, I am pleased to no end that you and Claire are on this product. Because I can tell you something right now. It has helped me immensely. I mean, it really has. I had problems with leg circulation, the old gastrocnemius at night, tightening up. That's blood circulation.
Yes.
I've been taking his product, and I couldn't be finer if I was frog hair in Carolina right now. I mean, it's good stuff, and I would encourage. If you're listeners to your program, you have actually. Maybe I shouldn't make this admission on air, but you actually have better numbers on my network than I do. So the ones that don't carry over to my show that are listening to you right now, if you've thought about doing this, quit thinking about it. Just do it. You will never be sorry. I mean, it's not that expensive, and the health benefits are absolutely fantastic. And you and Claire, Mike, stay on this because we got to keep you around. We got to keep you healthy. Got to keep that old brain synapsing. And your program every day, it's a real joy. I'm now listening to it, the full show every day, which I hardly do that to any talk show host on this network.
Oh, well, my goodness, I'm flattered. I'm blushing if you're watching on BAM Music here. The really good thing about Extendivite, of course, is that when we run our commercials, we don't have to have that high-pitched, rapid voice saying, use of this medication may lead to whatever it is it's going to do. There are no disclaimers necessary because again, this is all natural. It's all from nature. It's been part of the biosphere of Earth for millions of years, and we're just taking advantage of what's already out there.
We're not replicating this stuff in a drug laboratory. At one time there was holistic medicines, and that was it. They duplicated everything in a lab, but there's something you can't duplicate. If you use natural ingredients, why would you have to duplicate it chemically and through a lab? This product is great. And Don, keep cutting those commercials because you got a fine radio voice.
Well, thank you very much, John, and thanks for coming on and sharing your experiences. I know you didn't mention your memory there at all, but that's
sorry.
Okay
What were
too,
we talking
there's a lot
about?
Of people out there with, there's a lot of people out there with memory.
Keep the old synapses going. You don't lose the memory; you just lose the pathway to it. So, Mike, thanks for letting me jump in there for a minute.
My pleasure, and thank you for spending time with Don and I. And we're almost to the end of this segment again. Don, what's about the future? Is there going to be like a new, improved product? Are you planning any new directions to take what is obviously a successful formula?
No.
Okay.
I just continue to market and continue to get it out there. This product has proven itself time and time again anecdotally. People who are taking it are getting benefits. People who buy it and don't take it, well, they don't get any benefits. And as for side effects, let's see, what can I say? More energy, good health, boosted immune system, less colds and flus. No need to get a flu shot if you're taking this. And that's a good thing because no mercury or thimerosal. And there's just nothing I can do to improve what God has already put out there for us.
Well, that's a very, very good sentiment. We actually have a caller on the line, Glenn from Roanoke. Do you have a real quick question for Don because we're almost out of time?
Yeah, I'll be as quick as I can. Prior to taking it, I had diabetic neuropathy. The Extendivite reduced that significantly. Acid reflux was reduced. I had athlete's foot, very severe, trimmed that down to about 75% dandruff. It's almost completely gone. I had occipital neuralgia at the base of my skull. I was having migraines reduced by about 90%. Heart palpitations, my heart would kind of stall out, like I would skip a beat. Very uncomfortable. And when walking from downstairs going to sleep, by the time I got to the bedroom, which is just one flight of stairs, my heart was pounding coming out of my chest. My vision was blurry. This completely solved that problem. Great product. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call, Glenn. And Don, do you want to stay over into the next segment?
If you've got other things to do, you go right ahead.
All right. Well, Don, thank you very much for spending time with us, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here, and I want to share a little bit of a story with you. And it's not really a story. It is, in fact, history. Do you remember when home computers first came out, and they were simple, they worked, they did what you wanted them to do, and then the corporate mindset took over and they started getting bloated and things were added on and more things were put in there supposedly to increase their value and their price until we have today these bloated behemoths which are full of bugs and problems. It seems like we cannot get away from the reality that there's always going to be something not working the way it should within our present day computers. The same thing can be said to be true of medicine, pharmaceuticals. When you have medicines that are derived from nature, like Extendivite, they're simple, they do what you want them to do, there are no negative side effects, but that's not good enough for the pharmaceutical corporations who want to basically take over the beneficial parts of these medications and then change them around to get patents on them. Then they add adjuvants and fillers and all these other things to supposedly add value and jack up the price until you have our current state of orthodox medical care where the medications are ineffective and in many cases toxic. And now they're finally admitting that the reason the annual flu vaccine doesn't really work is the way it's being manufactured is actually destroying its efficacy. And so maybe it is time, and I'm not being a Luddite here, but maybe it's time for us to favor the simple and elegant over the grandiose and overcomplicated. And that's one of the reasons why Claire and I are on this product here. All right, let's take a phone call. Gaither in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm not, the product's excellent. I take it myself. I not mean to change the subject, but I'm going to talk about the civil disobedience, the Gandhi effect.
Yes.
I wish we could start getting. I have an idea. Let's give them an ultimatum about these trials and to bring this stuff open, or else we're going to take our license plates off our car. And then we'll know who they are, and they won't know who we are anymore. We can do that. That'll be the first step. Let them know. Let's give them a guideline of like a 5-step situation of non-compliance, and we'll stick to it. Let's do a guideline and have everybody pull together, all nationalities, everybody, and just do this. And then I believe that will cross the lines of what we're doing. The problem with race in that is when we unify against a common enemy.
Well, that's the reason. That's the reason the government is trying to divide us against each other: black against white, women against men, young against old, gays against straight, to keep us bickering amongst ourselves, to prevent us from uniting against the real cause of all the misery in our life, which is that federal government. And again, there was that poll that was conducted last week where they asked Americans, what are you most afraid of? And I guess the pollsters were hoping that the Americans would say ISIS or something like that. And it came on back that the majority of Americans view our own government as the biggest threat to their lives right now.
Yeah, well, the way I'm looking at it, and with those license plates, that's a big statement. That's for their way to get, to steal from us, to be road pirates, and to let them know that we don't have to put up with this. That we are, even if 10% do it, you know what I mean?
Yes.
That would make a statement. I mean, they can't write everybody. If you do, you just say, I lost my plate for the day. You know what I mean? It's a fix-it ticket. And it'll drive. And the thing I also wanted to do is the toll roads. I think everybody put foil over their toll keys, on their windshields, foil them up, and then everybody was just go the free road. And it's our roads anyway. Let's take back the mobility, the streets, and that's where we're at. Let's take it back from the bottom up.
Well,
it's not going to work. There's no way we can fix it from the top down. That's
no,
wrong.
that much is obvious. I agree with you. They're never going to fix it from the top down because the top loves it the way it is. It's just an endless source of money from our pockets to their pockets, and they don't see any reason why that should change here. But again, I don't know that we need to necessarily put out ideas or suggestions. I think when the American people reach the point where they really are not going to be able to accept anymore, they'll just stop cooperating completely. And again, go back and look what happened at the Soviet Union. Nobody got up there and said to the Soviet people, let's just stop supporting our government. It was just something that occurred to everybody pretty much at the same time, and they all said, yeah, I've had it. I've reached my breaking point. This is it. I'm not part of this government's worldview anymore, and the Soviet Union fell.
Well, also, but the Soviet Union, also the giant gangs took over, and believe it or not, they protected their little towns and that from different gangs. I knew a lot of Russians who come back and said if they wouldn't have joined a certain group, they wouldn't have made it. And so a lot of people have this misnomer that everybody in Russia, they collapsed, they had a rough time, and it worked out. No, they had to pick and choose alliances, and that's how they made it through that within their groups. It wasn't like some big national, everybody recovered at once. There's a lot of people that still haven't recovered, which, let's say that anymore. But another one little subject I didn't want to hit is I scan on the radio all the police, fire, and airplanes, and all I'm hearing anymore is these people that are disillusioned walking around in the middle of the street, not on their meds, or they're saying their levels aren't right. This is amazing. It's happening everywhere. Airplanes are talking about it. We have a person that is disillusioned. These cops around the little town I'm at, and every day there's 3 or 4 people walking around aimless in the street in the middle of the highway. And it's amazing. People are fried.
Yeah, they are.
Anyway, I'll let you deal with that.
Yeah, you can only put so much pressure on a population before you start seeing some really aberrant behavior. And it's happening here, in our country. People have just been pushed to the breaking point. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Yep. Apparently, the CIA just all of a sudden decided they were going to release a whole bunch of documents about Osama bin Laden. And the payoff in there is a document, 19-page document, purportedly written by a senior member of Al-Qaeda, saying that Al-Qaeda and Iran are buddy-buddy and hug each other and trade wet, sloppy kisses. So we're starting to see the ramp-up of the propaganda to lead us to a war with Iran. Oh, we have to go after Iran. Iran is supporting Al-Qaeda. So was Hillary Clinton. Let's make war on her. Now, getting on back to the economic news here, there's an interesting little article that came out of the Daily Mail where regulators are now starting to say that they're very worried about the emergence of artificial intelligence in the computers being used in the financial world. And they're saying it needs to be monitored very, very carefully because they're operating beyond the understanding of their own programmers. They're operating at speeds well beyond human capacity, and they could cause tremendous damage to the world's economic system, which, by the way, I made a video. It was actually made for a conference on the rise of artificial intelligence, and we linked it to whatreallyhappened.com. And it talks about how computers are already in control of much of the world through the world's financial systems. And again, those computers, they only have one priority programmed into them: make more money more quickly. Any other considerations about product efficacy, safety, benefit to society, not even a factor. These computers are oblivious to such considerations, and we do need to be very, very careful about that. Now, as you know, over in Spain has cracked down on Catalonia, and apparently, despite pleas from Catalonia to the European Union to intervene in Catalonia's quest for independence, Brussels is backing Madrid. Yes, you slapped those people down. How dare they to say that they don't want to be part of our global empire anymore? And everyone's saying, why would Catalonia want to quit Spain? I mean, really? Well, it's the economy. Catalonia is a very prosperous region. Spain has literally been propping up the rest of the country by siphoning wealth out of Catalonia. Catalonia is sick of it. The same way Britain was sick of having their wealth siphoned off to prop up the rest of the European Union, leading to Brexit. And Germany's getting pretty fed up with it as well. But what we're seeing is the beginning of a push for more regional separatism all across Europe, and for that matter, the entire world. Everybody understands what globalism is about, what they want, the New World Order, a global fascist dictatorship enslaving us all to a global private central bank. They don't want to have anything to do with it. They want to break free. And in the process of trying to break free, as we're seeing in Catalonia and all of these other countries, well, like Yemen, which was trying to break free of U.S. puppet rule, we're seeing the true face of the New World Order exposed, and it is fascistic in the extreme. Now, Austria, Hungary, and the Czechs have formed an anti-Soros, pro-Russia alliance. And again, it's another example of the more pressure that is coming in from the West and from U.S. and from Soros, the more it's pivoting these countries away and toward Russia. Even Israel is now all of a sudden upset with what Soros has been doing there, and they're passing a new bill to prevent, quote, hostile funding, end quote, from leftist organizations. And so apparently member of the Knesset, Mika Zohar, announced on Monday that he planned to submit a bill that would make it harder for leftist organizations to receive funding from organizations considered hostile to Israel. So now even Israel is seeing Soros as hostile. Because Soros isn't loyal to anybody except George Soros and his dream of a one-world government. Now, we've often commented about this amazing amount of corruption, and especially this sex abuse, sex harassment, assault, pedophilia that seems to permeate not just entertainment but government. Huge scandal over in Great Britain. And I had postulated a while ago that maybe part of the rite of passage into the upper stratosphere of power and wealth was that you had to do something like this so that you could be controlled. You could be depended on because you were blackmailable. And now it's starting to look like maybe I wasn't that far off because apparently Theresa May has been receiving reports that the parliamentarian whips are using blackmail of sexual abuse and pedophilia to control the members of Parliament. And that is a very, very alarming situation, because if the same thing is happening in this country, it means that these supposed elected legislatures are not listening to the people. They're listening to those who've got the negatives, the recordings, the videos of their behavior. And the whole system is held together in this mutual Gordian knot of interconnected blackmail, bribery, and threats. Now, getting into the world of political correctness, apparently a member of the European Parliament, Bill Etheridge, was booked to be the first speaker at the newly formed Liberate the Debate Society at Sussex University. And the society was set up by politics students who wanted to promote free speech and discuss controversial topics. And instead, the society was told that Mr. Etheridge's talk on libertarianism and free speech had been deemed medium-high risk and would be allowed to go ahead only if the speech complied with a series of measures from the university to ensure the safety of speakers and of students. So in other words, we have a free speech society whose first speech is being censored to make sure it doesn't have any trigger words or affects the snowflakes. Now, this next story is right out of Monty Python, and I put a video up to illustrate it. The British government has now declared that men can get pregnant too, not just women. This is liberalism to the age of a mass mental illness. And apparently the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office wants edits made to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Basically, it's deemed the phrase pregnant women is excluding transgender people who have given birth. Well, I hate to be the one to break this to you, but following the surgery by which a man becomes a woman, he can't have a kid. It's not all there. Now, if they had a kid before the transgender surgery, they were a woman at that time. But it really is just another one of these attacks on our sense of self and our identity. And it really is silly. Doesn't the British government have more important things to worry about? Now, meanwhile, over in the Summerhill School in Kingswinford, West Midlands, parents have become furious when they discovered the school had put closed-circuit TV cameras in the toilets. And the parents are saying this is intrusive, it's creepy. They're concerned that images of their children on the toilets could be recorded, leaked out, used to bully and harass them. The school bosses are saying the cameras are there to prevent bullying and to prevent vandalism. But that is a little bit over the top when you have a camera watching you do what you do on the toilet. If I were fortunate enough to have a child and they were going to a school and I found out they were doing that, that kid would be out of school and homeschooled. 24 hours. No, you are not spying on my kid. Remember that big stink here in the U.S. a few years ago where the school-issued laptops were found to have spyware installed on them, so the school administrators and teachers could spy on the kids in their own bedroom on the school-supplied laptops. The schools have no business what's going on in the kids' home. That is way, way over the line. Now, do you remember that stink a while back where there was a police officer wanted blood drawn from an unconscious patient, and the nurse refused because under Utah law it's not allowed, and the officer arrested her, and it turned out it was a wrongful arrest, and she has finally settled for a $500,000 settlement for the wrongful arrest. She was right. You don't draw blood from somebody who's unconscious because you don't know why they're unconscious. You could make things worse. And by the way, getting back to that NFL kneeling nonsense, which has already gone on way too long, apparently ESPN has lost 480,000 subscribers in October. People are that disgusted with the politicalization of sporting events. And ESPN is now talking about just dropping Monday Night Football. They can't afford it. They're losing way too much money on it. We're going to take a break here for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And let's talk a little bit about the Black Death, the plague. And it's a real problem over in Madagascar, and it's something that does happen there every once in a while. But apparently this outbreak is far more severe. It was amplified by one of the traditional religious rituals of Madagascar, which is where they, on their equivalent of the Day of the Dead, they walk around with the dead bodies wrapped up, and it's spreading like crazy. Now, so far, 124 people have died, 1,300 infected. Doctors are saying the figure's definitely going to go up because they're not out into the more remote areas yet. But warnings have now been issued by the World Health Organization for South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, Kenya, Ethiopia, Comoros, the Seychelles, Mauritius, and Reunion, that they are all at risk of infection. Why have they not closed the harbors and airports on Madagascar? Now, they've confirmed that this outbreak of the Black Death is the exact same bacteria that wiped out at least 25 million people in Europe during the 13th and 14th centuries. So is this another great plague, or is this somebody's idea of biological warfare to wipe out the population of the continent of Africa? We're not really sure about that. Story that just now came on in, apparently Judicial Watch is pointing out in the wake of what happened in Manhattan that now Special Counsel Robert Mueller basically at one time worked with radical Islamist groups to purge anti-terrorism training materials that were found to be offensive to Muslims. Now, that's just a little bit out there. And especially with regard to the expectation that there's going to be riots on Saturday, November 4th, and yes, there's a protest scheduled here in Honolulu at Ala Moana Park. Democrats are already starting to realize that all of this radical, violent, left-wing protesting is actually harming the Democratic brand, which is already battered and bruised because of what Hillary and Debbie Wasserman Schultz did, first of all, to Bernie Sanders, and then second of all to the American people as a whole. And so we may be looking at a major backlash. If there is violence across the U.S. on Saturday, it may not result in Trump and Pence leaving the White House, but the collapse of the Democratic Party itself. And again, I want to point back to that very strange email we got from the local Republican Party saying, don't go down there. Don't go down there because we're hearing that there are going to be agent provocateurs dressed up like Trump supporters committing acts of violence. And it all looks like it's bought and paid for. It's very well organized. They're going to have these events in a lot of different cities. Stay away from them. But remember, it is bought and paid for. We now know that the leadership of Antifa has been coordinating with the leadership of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They all met at the G20. And I'll bet you George Soros is writing all those paychecks. All right, there's the music. I need to get out of here. I got another interview to do here. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. We'll be back here tomorrow on RBN and Aloha America.